All right, let's dive in. We're tackling personal cybersecurity today, and we've got some great material to work with. You guys sent in this lecture by Dr. Daniel Aweda.
The professor.
Yeah, the professor, exactly, on preventing identity theft. And wow, he does not mess around. 26 steps to protect our data. 26.
That's a lot. It's a lot to digest.
It is, but that's why we're here to break it down. Before we get into the steps, though, I gotta say, some of the stats the professor shared, yikes. Talk about a wake-up call.
Yeah.
I mean, did you know that, there's a data breach every 39 seconds?
It's crazy, right? And it's not just these big companies you hear about in the news, it's everyday people, too.
Exactly. So, all right, let's bring in our cybersecurity guru to help us unpack all this. What do we do with these 26 steps? Where do we even begin?
Well, the good news is it's not just a giant to-do list. The professor, he gives us a framework. It's like, think of it like building a fortress around your digital life.
Okay, I like that, a fortress.
Yeah. Each step is another layer of protection, right? Another brick in the wall.
So it's not about getting overwhelmed. It's about strategically fortifying ourselves.
Exactly.
So if we're building a fortress, where do we start? What's the foundation?
Well, any good fortress needs a strong gate, and that's where passwords come in.
Okay, yeah. Passwords, we know they're important.
But the professor really dives into the why here. Strong, unique passwords for every single account. I mean, he even talks about password cracking techniques and why just adding an exclamation point isn't enough anymore.
It's so easy to think, oh, that won't happen to me.
Right, right.
But when you hear how these hackers actually work, it's like, oh, okay, I need to up my game.
And this is where, a password manager can be a game changer, you know?
Password managers, okay, I've heard of them, but I always thought they were kind of for techie people. Not for me.
Not at all. It's like having a trusted guard at your gate remembering all those complex passwords for you.
Yeah.
I've been using one for years. Honestly, it's a lifesaver.
So it's not just about security, it's about convenience too.
Totally. No more resetting passwords every other week because you can't remember them.
Maybe I need to look into that.
Seriously, I can't recommend it enough.
Okay, strong passwords, password managers noted.
Yeah.
What's the next level of defense in our fortress?
Let's talk about MFA, multi-factor authentication.
Oh, MFA. I have kind of a love-hate relationship with that one. Sometimes it feels like such a hassle, You're trying to log in and it's like, another step, another code. Ugh.
I get it. It can be a little annoying sometimes, but it's worth it.
But is it really that important?
Think of it this way. If your password is the key to your fortress gate, MFA is like having a guard who checks your ID before they let you in. Even if someone steals your key, they still can't get past that second layer of security.
Okay, so even if, let's say, I fall for a phishing scam and a hacker gets my password, MFA could still save me.
Exactly. The professor, he actually compares it to having two locks on your front door.
Makes sense.
And he's really adamant about using authentication apps over SMS codes.
Why is that?
Because those SMS codes can be intercepted, but authentication apps generate codes offline, making them much more secure. It's like having a secret knock that only you and the guard know.
Right. I've heard about that. So it's kind of like a next level security system. So we've got our strong gate, our guard checking IDs. What else do we need to fortify this fortress?
Well, any good security system involves monitoring.
Okay, so like security cameras?
Kind of. The professor talks about regularly checking your financial accounts, bank statements, credit card bills, all that. It's about catching any suspicious activity early before it becomes a big problem.
Yeah, I have to admit, I'm guilty of just skimming those statements. Who really enjoys scrutinizing every transaction?
Right. But it's so important. It's like having guards patrolling the walls, making sure no one's trying to sneak in.
I guess it only takes one little breach to cause a lot of damage.
He actually shared a story about a student who caught a fraudulent charge on their credit card just because they happened to be looking over their statement while waiting for a coffee.
Wow.
They reported it immediately and prevented a ton of further damage.
See, that's what I love about the professor. He brings it to life with these real-world examples. So vigilance is key.
Absolutely.
Okay, vigilant monitoring added to the fortress checklist. What else should we be doing to keep those digital invaders at bay?
The professor talks about being mindful of what you share, both online and offline. It's amazing how much information we give away without even thinking about it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like addresses, phone numbers, birth dates on social media. It's all out there.
And it's valuable intel for identity thieves.
It's true. We post pictures of our vacation while we're still on vacation, basically telling everyone our house is empty. Not the smartest move.
Exactly. And it's not just social media. Be wary of any unsolicited emails or phone calls asking for personal information. Scammers are getting so sophisticated these days.
Oh, yeah, they're good.
They often pose as legitimate organizations.
Oh, totally. I've gotten those emails that look like they're from my bank or whatever, and it's like, wait a minute.
Right. And remember, legitimate companies rarely pressure you for sensitive information over the phone or email.
So it's like having a trust no one policy for anything online.
Well, not quite trust no one, but definitely verify, verify, verify.
Hmm.
The professor, he gave this great example of a phishing email that looked exactly like it was from a popular online store, offering a crazy discount.
Oh, I've seen those.
But the email address was slightly off, and when you hovered over the link, it led to a completely different website.
Wow. So even if it looks legit, there can be red flags hidden in the details. It's like those hidden booby traps in ancient temples. You got to watch your step.
Oh.
Speaking of tricky traps, the professor had some strong words about public Wi-Fi.
Public Wi-Fi. Yeah, it's tempting, especially when you're on the go and you need to get online. But it can be a cybersecurity nightmare.
Yeah, why is that? I mean, it's free Wi-Fi. What's the big deal?
Think of it this way. On a public Wi-Fi network, your data is basically traveling through the airwaves unprotected.
Like sending a message on a postcard instead of a sealed envelope. Anyone could potentially read it.
Exactly. And you wouldn't write your bank account details on a postcard, would you?
Definitely not. So no online banking or shopping on public Wi-Fi. Got it. But what if you absolutely have to use it? The professor mentioned something about a VPN, right?
Yes. A VPN, or virtual private network, it creates a secure, encrypted tunnel for your data, so it's much harder for snoopers to intercept.
So it's like adding an extra layer of armor to your data when you're venturing into dangerous territory. VPNs. Got it. It feels like we've already covered so much ground, but I'm sure there's more to uncover in the professor's lecture, right?
Oh, absolutely. We've just scratched the surface. There are still plenty of layers to add to our digital fortress. It's funny, we always think about these like external threats, the hackers, the scammers, but the professor, he reminds us that sometimes the weakest link is our own devices.
Right. It's like having all these high-tech security systems for the main gate, but leaving a window open on the second floor. So what kind of device-specific advice does the professor offer?
Well, he starts with the basics. Strong passwords for all your devices, and I don't just mean your laptop or your phone.
It's like my smart TV. Does that really need a strong password?
Think about it. Anything that connects to the internet is a potential entry point for hackers. Your smart TV, your Wi-Fi router, even your fitness tracker.
I've been meaning to change the default password on my router for ages. It's one of those things I know I should do, but it always slips my mind. Does it really make that much of a difference?
It absolutely can. Those default passwords are often easy to guess, which means anyone within range of your Wi-Fi could access your router, and then boom, they're into your devices and data.
Okay, point taken. Strong passwords for all devices, check. What else does the professor recommend for keeping those devices locked down?
Encryption. He's a big advocate for encryption.
Encryption, okay. That sounds kind of technical, I'm not gonna lie.
It might sound complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. Basically, encryption scrambles your data so anyone who doesn't have the key can't read it.
So even if someone steals my laptop, they wouldn't be able to access my files if they're encrypted.
Exactly. Many devices have encryption built in, you just have to turn it on. And the professor, he actually explains the different types of encryption, like disk encryption, which protects your entire hard drive, versus, file encryption, where you can choose specific files or folders to protect.
That's really helpful. It's like choosing different levels of security depending on how sensitive the information is. Encryption, added to the fortress blueprints. What about backups? I know it's important, but I always procrastinate.
Procrastination, that's the enemy of cybersecurity. Backups are essential, like having a secret escape tunnel out of your fortress. If the main structure is compromised, you can still get out with your most valuable stuff.
Okay, I get it. Backups are important.
And these days, with cloud storage, it's easier than ever. You can set up automatic backups. It's like having a team of digital archivists constantly making copies of your files.
Okay, I'm convinced. Automatic backups are going on a to-do list right after this episode. But all this talk of fortresses and defenses, it almost makes you paranoid, Like you're constantly on guard waiting for the next attack.
I know what you mean. It's a balance, right? You want to be aware of the risks, but not let it take over your life.
Exactly, yeah.
But, as the professor says, knowledge is power. The more we understand how these threats work, the better we can protect ourselves.
That's a good point. So let's talk about one of the most cunning adversaries in the digital world, those pesky phishers. The professor dedicated a good chunk of his lecture to explaining how phishing scams work.
Yeah, he did. And it's amazing how these scams, like, they play on our human nature, you know?
Mhm.
Our trust, our willingness to help, our fear of missing out.
Oh, tell me about it. I almost fell for one recently. It looked like an email from my bank warning me about suspicious activity on my account. It even had their logo and everything.
They're getting so good at making these things look real, it's scary. But the professor, he gives some great tips for spotting fakes.
Right, like if it's coming from amaz0n.com instead of amazon.com, that's a big red flag.
Exactly. First thing, scrutinize that sender's email address. Any misspellings, weird variations, anything off, be suspicious.
Okay, good tip.
And don't just click on any link in an email, no matter how tempting the offer is. Hover over the link first, see where it's really going. If it doesn't match the sender's name or the website it's supposed to be, that's a huge red flag.
It's like checking for hidden trapdoors before you enter a room in the fortress. Any other tips for avoiding those digital bait-and-switch tactics?
The professor says always be wary of emails that create a sense of urgency, like you have to act right now.
Oh yeah, I've gotten those.
Legitimate organizations don't usually operate that way. Think about it. If your bank really suspected fraud, they'd call you directly. They wouldn't send a generic email with a link to update your info.
Right, that makes sense. So think before you click, verify the sender, and don't let yourself be pressured. It's like having a mental checklist before you open any door in your digital fortress. But what if, despite our best efforts, someone still manages to breach our defenses and steal our identity? What then?
The professor has a solution for that. Freezing your credit.
Okay, I've heard of credit freezes, but I've always been a little fuzzy on what they actually do. Can you break it down for us?
Sure. When you freeze your credit, you're basically locking down your credit report. So no one, not even you, can open new accounts in your name without unfreezing it first.
So it's like adding an extra layer of security to the vault where all your sensitive financial information is stored.
Exactly. And it's surprisingly easy to do. You can freeze and unfreeze your credit for free through the major credit bureaus' websites or apps.
That's amazing. I had no idea. It was so easy. It's like having a personal bodyguard for your credit report. But what about those times when you need to apply for a loan or open a new account? Do you have to unfreeze your credit every time?
You do, yeah, but it's a small price to pay for the peace of mind. And the unfreezing process is usually pretty quick. It only takes a few minutes or hours.
Okay, so temporary inconvenience for long-term peace of mind. Credit freezes, definitely going on the list. Are there any other proactive measures the professor recommends?
He's also a big fan of setting up fraud alerts on your credit reports.
Fraud alerts. Okay, what are those?
Basically, they notify lenders to take extra steps to verify your identity before they give you credit.
That's a great idea. It's like adding another layer of sensors to our fortress, making it even more difficult for intruders to get in undetected. So we've got strong passwords, encryption, backups, credit freezes, and fraud alerts. Is there anything else we can do to outsmart those cyber criminals?
The professor, he's got a whole bunch more tips, things that you might not think about right away, like shredding sensitive documents before you throw them away, or being careful about the security settings on your smart devices, and really understanding the privacy policies of the companies you share your info with.
So it really is like constantly reinforcing that fortress, huh?
Yeah, it's like, you don't just build a fortress and then forget about it. You got to keep those walls strong.
It's an ongoing process.
Exactly. The professor, he compares it to, like, tending a garden.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, plant the seeds, but you gotta water them, weed them, protect them from pests. Cybersecurity is the same. You gotta nurture it.
So I guess it's not about achieving like perfect security, but about staying vigilant, adapting, staying one step ahead.
Exactly, exactly. And one of the biggest mistakes people make, the professor says, is thinking, it won't happen to me.
Oh yeah, I've definitely been guilty of that.
It's easy to think that, but that complacency can make you vulnerable.
Okay, so how do we shift our thinking from it won't happen to me to security first? It feels like such a big mental leap.
The professor suggests starting small. Pick one or two things you can improve today.
Okay, so like baby steps?
Yeah, like maybe it's finally setting up that password manager we talked about, or enabling two-factor authentication on your most important accounts, or even just having a conversation with your family about online safety.
Those are great, very concrete things people can do.
The small steps, they add up.
So it's not about becoming a cybersecurity expert overnight. It's about building those habits, making it part of our daily lives.
Exactly, exactly. The professor actually shared this really interesting story about how he teaches his kids about online safety.
Oh, how does he do that?
He compares it to, like, teaching them to look both ways before crossing the street. It's not about scaring them, it's about empowering them to make good choices.
I love that. It's about starting early and making it normal, not scary.
It's about building a culture of cybersecurity.
Yeah, and starting with the people we're closest to.
And the professor, he believes that this culture shift can have a ripple effect.
Oh, interesting.
When we prioritize security in our own lives, we inspire others to do the same. It's like we're all adding bricks to the wall of this big digital fortress.
A collective fortress.
Exactly, a collective fortress makes the whole digital world a little bit safer for everyone.
It's really kind of inspiring, isn't it? To think we can all play a part in making things better.
It is. And at the end of his lecture, the professor leaves us with this really thought-provoking question.
Oh, what is it?
He asks, what's one thing you can do today to contribute to a culture of cybersecurity? It's like a challenge to each of us, to think beyond just our own personal security.
Yeah, to look at the bigger picture.
Think about how our actions impact everyone else.
That's a great question to leave us with. I mean, it could be anything, right?
Mm.
Sharing what we learned today with a friend or family member, maybe helping someone who's not as tech savvy set up their defenses, even just being more careful about what we post online.
Exactly, all those little things, they can make a difference.
So cybersecurity, it's not just a solo mission, it's a team effort.
We're all in this together.
And it's not just about preventing bad things from happening, it's about, like, creating a better future for the digital world.
A world where we can connect, create, explore, all that without fear.
Exactly. Where security isn't just an afterthought, it's the foundation.
Yeah, the foundation for everything we do online.
Well, I gotta say, I'm feeling pretty fired up and ready to take action. What about you?
Me too. It's
Yeah.
amazing how much we can learn in just a short amount of time.
That's the magic of the deep dive. We take these big, complex topics and break them down into something actionable.
And hopefully inspire people to keep learning.
And keep building those digital fortresses.
Exactly.
Well, before we sign off, don't forget to check out the show notes for links to all the resources we talked about today. You can find ways to connect with the professor himself, learn even more.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review.
We'd love to hear from you.
We're always looking for new topics to explore.
So until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and keep those digital defenses strong.